What if the light reaching your eyes right now left the sun before the first humans ever looked up at the sky? Every morning, the sun rises and light fills the world. Mountains, oceans, cities, forests. It feels instant, like it was always here, but it wasn't. That light has traveled farther than anything you can imagine. Nearly 150 million kilometers through perfect emptiness just to reach you. And that was only the last part of the journey, because long before it escaped the sun, it may have already spent hundreds of thousands of years trapped inside it. Deep inside the core, where temperatures reach 15 degrees Celsius, hydrogen atoms are forced together under impossible pressure. They fuse, and in that moment, energy is released. A photon is born, a single packet of light. No weight, no memory, no direction, just motion. And from the very first instant, it is lost. Not because it is slow, but because there is nowhere to go. Inside the sun, every step ends in collision. Every direction changes instantly, again and again and again. If you could see its path, it wouldn't be a line. It would be a maze that never ends. A journey that should take seconds, stretched into hundreds of thousands of years, until one day, everything changes. The photon reaches the surface of the sun, and for the first time, nothing blocks its path. No collisions, no chaos, only space. It escapes and begins the shortest part of its journey, 8 minutes across the silence of space. Mercury passes, then Venus, then Earth appears ahead, a small blue world, waiting. Maybe it falls into the ocean. Maybe it warms a leaf. Maybe it becomes part of a living cell. Or maybe it reaches your eyes and becomes what you call sight. Tonight, we follow the journey of just one photon, from the heart of a star to the moment it meets you. And everything begins deep inside the sun, where light is still trying to find its way out.
Long before it became sunlight, before it crossed space, before it ever had the chance to touch a leaf or warm your skin, our photon didn't exist. There was only hydrogen, an unimaginable amount of it. The sun is so familiar to us that it's easy to forget what it truly is. It isn't burning like a giant campfire. It isn't made of flames in the way fire exists here on Earth. The sun is something far stranger. A colossal sphere of plasma, so massive that its own gravity is constantly trying to crush it inward. Every second, about 600 million tons of hydrogen are pulled towards its center. Not because they want to be there, but because gravity never stops pulling. The deeper those atoms fall, the more crowded everything becomes. Pressure rises, temperatures climb higher and higher, until eventually matter begins behaving in ways that seem almost impossible. Deep inside the sun's core, roughly 150,000 kilometers from the center in every direction, the temperature reaches nearly 15 million degrees Celsius. The pressure is so enormous that hydrogen atoms, which normally repel one another, can no longer keep their distance. They are forced together, closer and closer, until something extraordinary happens. Their nuclei fuse. Two tiny building blocks of the universe become something new. This process is called nuclear fusion. It is the engine that powers nearly every star in the universe. Without it, the sun would become dark. The earth would freeze. Life, as we know it, would simply never have existed. Every second, billions upon billions of these fusion reactions occur deep inside the sun. Each one releases an astonishing amount of energy. Most of that energy begins as extremely powerful gamma-ray photons. Our story follows one of them, not because it is different, but because every photon has its own journey. At the instant it is created, our photon has no purpose. It is not trying to reach Earth. It has never heard of forests exist. It has never heard of oceans, or eyes, or life. It is simply energy released as one hydrogen nucleus becomes part of something larger. If we could somehow freeze time and look at that single moment, we would never find our photon alone. It is surrounded by an ocean of unimaginable brightness, photons being born everywhere, particles racing in every direction, electrons, atomic nuclei, plasma hotter than anything naturally found on Earth. There is no up, no down, no sky, no ground, only overwhelming heat and constant motion. Nothing remains still, not for an instant. If you could stand there, which of course no material ever could, the environment would be beyond description. Matter itself no longer behaves like the solids, liquids, and gases we know. Atoms have been stripped apart. Electrons move freely. The entire interior of the sun behaves like an enormous ocean of electrically charged plasma. It flows, it churns, it twists under the influence of gravity, pressure, and magnetic fields. And somewhere within that brilliant chaos, our photon is born. If the sun were completely empty inside, this would be the shortest story imaginable. A photon travels at the speed of light. It would leave the sun in just a few seconds. But the sun is anything but empty. In fact, the sun is so dense that a single centimeter inside its core contains far more matter than most people imagine. Every direction is crowded. Every path is blocked. Every tiny step forward ends in another collision. Our photon has only existed for the smallest fraction of a second, and already its first obstacle appears: an electron. The encounter lasts almost no time at all. The photon is absorbed. Almost immediately, another photon is emitted. Its energy changes slightly. Its direction changes completely. And the journey begins again. One collision, then another, then thousands, then millions. Our photon has not failed. This is simply how light escapes a star. Not by racing outward, but by wandering. By taking countless tiny steps, most of which lead to nowhere. Imagine standing in the middle of the largest forest on Earth. You cannot see the edge. Every single step you take, someone gently turns you in a random direction. Sometimes towards your destination. Sometimes away. Sometimes in a complete circle. You keep walking. Day after day. Year after year. Never stopping. Never knowing whether the next step brings you closer or farther away. That is the beginning of our photon's journey. Not a straight line, not a heroic escape, but the slow, patient, almost impossible search for a way out. And for our tiny traveler, that search has only just begun.
If you could somehow watch our photon from the outside, you might expect to see it racing toward the sun's surface. After all, nothing in the universe travels faster than light. Surely, it should escape in moments, but it doesn't. Instead, something almost impossible happens. Our photon becomes lost. Not because it doesn't know where to go. A photon doesn't choose a direction. It simply moves until something stops it. And inside the sun, something is always waiting. The newborn photon travels only a tiny distance, perhaps no farther than the width of a human finger, before meeting another charged particle, an electron. The collision happens instantly. The photon disappears. Its energy is absorbed. Almost immediately, a new photon is released, not necessarily with exactly the same energy, not necessarily in the same direction. The journey begins again. Another tiny step, another collision, another change. Again and again and again. From the outside, it almost looks as though the photon cannot make up its mind. Forward, left, back, right, up, down. No direction lasts for long. If someone traced its path, it wouldn't resemble an arrow. It would look like an impossibly tangled thread, knotted over itself countless times. Physicists call this a random walk. It is one of the most surprising ideas in nature. Imagine trying to leave an enormous stadium filled with billions upon billions of people. Every time you take a single step, someone gently spins you around. You walk again. Someone turns you once more. Sometimes you move closer to the exit. Sometimes you accidentally move farther away. Occasionally, you end up almost exactly where you started. Now imagine doing that, not for an hour, not for a day, but for hundreds of thousands of years. That is remarkably close to what happens inside the sun. The photon itself is never slow. Every tiny movement still happens at the speed of light, but those movements are so short and interrupted so often that real progress becomes painfully slow. One step, stop. Another step, turn. Another step, disappear, reappear. Every collision rewrites the journey. Every interaction erases the straight path that seemed possible only a moment before. There is no map, no memory, no destination, only motion and patience. From our perspective, it feels impossible. How could something moving at light speed take longer to escape the sun than all of recorded human history? The answer lies not in speed, but in distance actually gained. Imagine flipping a coin. Heads, you take one step forward. Tails, one step backward. Even after 1,000 flips, you may not be very far from where you began, not because you've stopped moving, but because so much of your movement cancels itself out. The photon's journey works in much the same way. It covers an astonishing total distance, far greater than the sun's diameter, yet much of that distance is spent wandering rather than escaping. Years pass, then centuries, then millennia. On Earth, continents slowly shift, mountains weather, species appear and vanish, ice ages come and go, civilizations rise and disappear. Still, our photon continues its invisible search for the surface. If humans had existed when its journey began, entire languages would have been born, spoken, forgotten, and replaced before this single photon ever escaped. Generations would have lived their entire lives never knowing that somewhere deep inside the sun, one tiny packet of light was still making its way outward. The sun itself hardly notices. Every second, countless new photons are born, countless others finally escape. Together, they create the sunlight that reaches every planet in the solar system. No single photon is important, yet without every one of them, there would be no daylight,
no warmth, no life. Our traveler is only one among an unimaginable crowd, and yet its story is unique because no two random walks are ever exactly the same. Some photons escape a little sooner, others wander even longer. Some may spend nearly 500,000 years taking billions upon billions of tiny detours before finding freedom. Our photon has no idea how much time has passed. For light itself, time does not unfold in the familiar way we experience it. There is no waiting, no boredom, no frustration, only the next interaction, the next direction, the next impossible step. Then, after a journey that has outlasted kingdoms, empires, and perhaps even humanity itself, the density around it begins, ever so slightly, to fall. The collisions become just a little less frequent, the path ahead just a little more open. For the first time since its birth, freedom is no longer impossible. It is simply very close. And beyond that final layer of glowing plasma, an ocean of empty space is waiting.
At the edge of the sun, something changes. Not suddenly, not with a clear moment you could point to, but gradually, like a crowded room slowly opening toward an exit. The plasma around our photon becomes thinner. Collisions, which once happened constantly, begin to space out. For the first time in its existence, the photon is no longer trapped in an endless maze. It is still inside the sun, but the sun is no longer equally dense in every direction. Above it, there is less and less matter, fewer electrons, fewer obstacles, more space, more possibility. Then, finally, it happens. A last interaction, a final scattering, and then nothing stops it anymore. Our photon escapes. There is no ceremony, no sound, no visible boundary it crosses, just a transition from chaos to emptiness, from a world so dense it defies intuition to a universe almost entirely empty. It is the first time in its existence that it moves in a straight line, not because it chooses to, but because nothing remains to force it otherwise. Now it is free. And freedom for a photon is movement at the maximum speed allowed by the universe. 300,000 kilometers every second. It leaves the sun behind, but the sun is still there, bright and immense, filling a large part of the sky behind it. Its journey through space has begun, and space is different. No collisions, no scattering, no interruptions, just motion, pure and uninterrupted. For the first time, distance begins to shrink in a meaningful way. Mercury appears first, a small, scorched world clinging close to the sun's gravity. The photon passes it without hesitation. Then Venus, wrapped in thick clouds that never reveal its surface. Then space opens again, quiet, endless. And then a faint blue point appears ahead, Earth. From this distance, it is fragile, small, almost lost in the darkness, but alive in a way no other known world is. Our photon does not aim for it, it does not choose it, but probability does the work. Countless photons leave the sun every second, and only a tiny fraction will intersect with a world. Even fewer will reach something living, and even fewer still will end their journey inside an eye. Somewhere on Earth, this photon may strike the ocean, adding a tiny amount of energy to waves that have been moving for billions of years. It may land on a leaf, helping power the invisible chemistry of photosynthesis. It may warm a patch of desert sand that will cool again as soon as night returns. Or it may enter something far more delicate, a living eye, a thin layer of cells designed to capture exactly this kind of traveler. If it does, then in a fraction of a second, it will be absorbed, and its journey will end not with destruction, but with transformation. Its energy will become a signal, a message, a perception. And somewhere in a quiet human mind, light will become sight. But before we reach that moment, our photon is still crossing the space between worlds. 8 minutes from the sun to Earth. 8 minutes of perfect clarity. No obstacles, no delay, no memory of the long struggle it took to escape. Only motion toward whatever it will become next. Earth is not a single destination for sunlight. It is 1,000 different outcomes happening at the same time. As our photon arrives, the planet does not receive it passively. It responds. Every surface changes what light becomes. Every material decides its fate. Nothing is neutral. If the photon lands on the ocean, it disappears beneath moving water. Its energy becomes motion, a tiny contribution to waves that never stop reshaping themselves. If it reaches the clouds, it may scatter in countless directions, some of it returning to space, some of it diffusing through the sky, softening everything it touches. If it strikes snow, it reflects almost completely, returning back into the sky, unchanged except for direction. If it enters desert sand, it is absorbed quickly, becoming heat, slowly raising the temperature of a world that is always balancing between extremes. If it touches a mountain, it becomes part of stone and shadow, shaping how the surface warms and cools throughout the day. Nothing on Earth experiences sunlight in the same way. Every place rewrites the story of the photon. But among all these possibilities, there is one interaction that carries a different weight. One that does not simply transform energy, but uses it to build life itself. A leaf. On the surface of a plant, millions of microscopic structures are waiting. They are not aware of the photon's journey. They do not know it came from the sun. They do not know it has traveled for years through space, or perhaps for hundreds of thousands of years inside the star itself. They only respond to what arrives. When the photon hits the leaf, something extraordinary happens. It is absorbed not as heat, but as instruction. Inside the leaf, a molecule captures the photon's energy, and in doing so, it begins a process that has shaped nearly every ecosystem on Earth. Photosynthesis. Water and carbon dioxide are rearranged. Energy is stored. Sugar is created. Not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, with the patience of nature itself. This is the moment where sunlight stops being just light and becomes life, because every forest, every field, every green surface on Earth exists because countless photons arrived here and were used. A single leaf may capture millions of them in a single second, but each one, no matter how small, represents the same journey. A journey that began inside a star long before Earth was even formed. From here, the energy does not stay in the leaf. It enters the chain of life. The leaf is eaten, or it falls and decays, or it becomes part of soil that feeds something else. Energy moves forward, quietly, inevitably, from plant to herbivore to predator, to everything that breathes and moves on this planet. Even you are part of this chain. Every heartbeat, every thought, every movement is powered by energy that once arrived as light, a photon that may have traveled for years or wandered for hundreds of thousands of years before escaping the sun, has now become part of biology, not as light anymore, but as life, and yet most photons do not reach this far. Most are scattered by the atmosphere, reflected back into space, absorbed before they ever touch a living cell. Only a fraction become part of this biological story. But the ones that do change everything. As Earth rotates, the light begins to shift. The sun lowers in the sky. Angles change, shadows stretch, and the same photon stream that once felt endless begins to thin. Evening approaches, and with it a transition that has repeated for billions of years. The world slowly turns away from its star, and the journey of light enters its final phase.
If there is a moment where a photon's journey changes meaning, this is it. A leaf does not simply receive sunlight, it uses it. Inside its thin green surface, there are structures so small they are invisible to the naked eye, and yet so complex that they quietly sustain almost all life on Earth. When a photon enters a leaf, it does not travel far. Within a fraction of a second, it is absorbed by a molecule called chlorophyll, a molecule that has one simple purpose: to catch light. The photon disappears, but its energy does not. It is transferred instantly, like a spark passing from one system to another. And in that transfer, something begins. Water molecules are split. Carbon dioxide is rearranged. New bonds are formed. Sugars begin to exist, not as ideas, not as symbols, but as real stored energy. This process is silent. There is no explosion, no visible movement, and yet it is one of the most important chemical processes on Earth, because everything that eats depends on it. Everything that breathes oxygen depends on it. Everything that moves in some way depends on it. The photon itself is gone, but what it enabled remains. If you imagine Earth as a system, then sunlight is not just illumination, it is input, continuous, relentless, necessary. Without it, the entire chain of life collapses. Forests would stop growing. Oceans would lose balance, atmospheres would change, and life as we know it would slowly fade. But here, inside this single leaf, none of that complexity is visible. Only chemistry, only transformation, only the quiet conversion of light into stored energy. And yet, this is not the end of the journey, because the energy captured here does not stay locked in place. A leaf is not a destination, it is a beginning. An herbivore eats it, a fruit grows from it, it decays into soil. In every path, the energy continues forward, carried through ecosystems like an invisible current, from plant to animal to predator to decomposer, and back into the earth again. And somewhere in that cycle, a human breathes it in. A human thinks with it. A human lives because of it. This is where the photon story becomes something else entirely. It is no longer just a journey through space. It is a journey through life itself. And even though the photon is gone, its influence has only just begun. Because now we move into the part of the story where energy leaves the leaf and enters the living world. The energy does not stay in the leaf for long. Nothing in nature is designed to stay still. A leaf is eaten, torn, digested, or it falls to the ground and slowly breaks apart, returning to soil. But in every case, the energy inside it continues forward. It does not vanish. It simply changes form. When a small insect eats the leaf, the stored energy becomes movement.
When a larger animal eats that insect, the same energy moves again. When a predator hunts that animal, the chain continues, always forward, always transforming. At no point does the original photon exist anymore, but its energy is still present, traveling through biology. This is one of the most overlooked truths about light. It does not just illuminate the world, it powers it.
Every muscle contraction, every heartbeat, every thought in a living brain requires energy that ultimately began as sunlight. Some of that energy entered plants only hours ago. Some of it may have entered leaves days ago. And some of it began its journey inside the sun thousands of years before ever reaching Earth. From plant to herbivore to carnivore to decomposer, the cycle continues without pause. Even when life ends, the energy does not. It returns to the environment. It becomes part of soil, water, air, and eventually new plants begin the process again. Nothing is lost, only redistributed, only reshaped. This is why ecosystems are not collections of separate things. They are loops, circuits, flows of energy moving endlessly through matter. And somewhere inside that flow, you appear. A human body is not separate from this system. It is part of it. Every bite of food you take carries energy that once came from light. Every meal is sunlight transformed. Even the simplest action, standing up, breathing, thinking, depends on energy that began as a photon inside the sun. But the story does not end in the body, because there is one place where this energy takes on something new. Not movement, not growth, but awareness inside the brain.
At the end of this journey, there is a final transformation. Not in the world outside, but inside you. Every moment you are awake, billions of photons are passing through your eyes. Most of them miss. Most of them scatter. Most of them never become anything meaningful to your perception. But a few, just a few, reach exactly the right place. They enter the cornea, pass through the lens, and land on the retina, a thin layer of cells at the back of your eye. Here, light is no longer light, it becomes signal. When a photon hits a photoreceptor cell, something extraordinary happens. A molecule inside that cell changes shape. That tiny change triggers a cascade of reactions, turning light into electricity. Not electricity like lightning, but microscopic electrical signals carried through neurons, moving instantly toward the brain. This is the moment where the outside world becomes experience. A tree is no longer just a tree, it is an image. A face is no longer just matter, it is recognition. The sky is no longer just scattered light, it is blue. But none of this exists out there in the way we imagine. It is built inside you, from signals, from patterns, from energy that began its journey inside a star. And among all those photons, there is no difference. Each one follows the same laws. Each one carries energy at the same speed. Each one has the same potential. But only a few become part of vision. The moment you see something, you are witnessing the end of a journey that may have lasted longer than human history.
A journey that began in nuclear fusion, wandered through the sun, escaped into space, crossed billions of kilometers, and finally collapsed into a single electrical impulse inside your brain. And in that instant, light becomes awareness. But vision is not the only way light shapes your world, because everything you see, every color, every shadow, every sunset, is also a story of photons interacting with matter in different ways. And that is where our journey turns next, to the language of light itself and why the world looks the way it does. The world does not have color on its own. Color is something that happens when light meets matter. A photon arrives, and the surface it touches decides what becomes of it. Some photons are absorbed, some are reflected, some are scattered, and the ones that return to your eyes are what you experience as color. A clear blue sky is not a surface at all, but the result of sunlight scattering through the atmosphere. Shorter wavelengths scatter more easily, spreading blue light across the entire sky. Sunsets turn red because sunlight travels through more atmosphere at low angles, filtering out the shorter wavelengths, leaving warmer tones behind. Even a rainbow is not an object in the sky. It is light being bent, reflected, and separated inside tiny droplets of water. Every color you've ever seen is the result of interaction. Never isolation. Light is never just light, it is communication between photons and matter. And the world is simply the result of how that communication unfolds. Snow reflects almost everything. Oceans absorb most light and reflect only a fraction. Metal reflects in sharp, controlled patterns. Skin absorbs and scatters light in complex ways, creating the appearance of life itself. Nothing is random, everything is physics, but to us it becomes beauty, meaning, emotion. A sunset is not just red light, it is the last long path of sunlight through a thick atmosphere, stretched and filtered before night begins. And as Earth rotates away from the sun, that light begins to fade. The angles change, the photons stop arriving in the same way, and slowly, the world transitions to darkness.
As Earth turns away from the sun, light begins to disappear. Not at once, but gradually, softly, like a breath leaving the world. Shadows stretch across the ground. Colors lose their intensity. Details begin to fade into quiet shapes. And then, the sun slips below the horizon. Night is not the absence of light everywhere. It is simply the absence of direct sunlight in this moment. Photons still exist. They are everywhere, scattered in different directions, reflected from the moon, or absorbed into the atmosphere, or lost into space after missing Earth entirely. But the direct stream that defined the day is gone. The surface of the planet cools, the air changes, animals begin to shift their behavior, forests become still. Cities replace sunlight with artificial sources, tiny controlled versions of the same phenomenon, electric light. Each one powered indirectly by energy that once came from the sun. Even at night, we do not escape sunlight. We only store it, transform it, recreate it. And somewhere far away inside the sun, new photons are already forming, born from fusion, beginning their long, invisible journey. Most of them will never reach Earth.
Some will travel for hundreds of thousands of years inside the sun. Others will escape almost immediately, but none of them know what awaits. Night on Earth feels complete, final, still, but in reality, it is only a pause in perception, a temporary turning away from a constant stream. The sun has not stopped. The photons have not ended. Only the connection between them and this side of Earth has shifted. Above the darkened world, space remains unchanged, silent, empty, infinite. And beyond that emptiness, the sun continues to shine, unaware of night, unaware of darkness, only continuing its process as it has for billions of years. And as Earth rotates through darkness, the next sunrise is already being prepared.
Night does not last forever, not because it ends, but because the planet turns, slowly, silently, without pause. And somewhere on the edge of darkness, the first hint of morning begins. Before the sun is visible, its light already exists. High above the horizon, photons begin scattering through the atmosphere in new ways. The sky shifts from black to deep blue to soft gradients of orange and gold. It feels like something is being created, but nothing is being created in this moment, only revealed. The light was always there. It was simply waiting for Earth to face the right direction again. Inside the sun, the process never stopped. Every second, millions of photons are born, each one beginning its journey in the same violent heart of fusion. Some will wander for thousands of years before escaping. Others will break free almost instantly. Most will never touch anything living, but a few will cross space, reach Earth, and become part of something extraordinary. A leaf, a cloud, an ocean wave, a human eye. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises again, it will feel ordinary, familiar, almost expected. But that feeling hides something much older. The light touching your face at sunrise may have begun its journey long before recorded history, before cities, before language, before humans existed at all. It may have been trapped inside the sun while glaciers advanced across ancient Earth, while species appeared and disappeared, while continents shifted into their present shape. And now, after a journey that may span hundreds of thousands of years inside a star and only 8 minutes through space, it finally arrives. Not as a memory, not as a story it can tell, but as presence, as warmth, as sight. And somewhere inside that sunrise, there is always another photon, just beginning, lost in the heart of the sun, waiting for its first collision, its first step, its first impossible path outward. And so the story continues, again, and again, and again, because light does not end, it only travels. And now the journey slows, not because it ends, but because it continues everywhere at once. The photon we followed is no longer one thing. It became heat, it became motion, it became life, it became vision, and in doing so, it stopped being separate at all. That is what light always does. It connects, it transforms,
It disappears, only to reappear somewhere else, inside another surface, another moment, another world. So when you look around you now, nothing you see is truly still. The sunlight in this room may have traveled through space longer than human history. The warmth on your skin may have once passed through ancient skies that no longer exist. Even the light you remember from earlier today is already gone, but its path continues elsewhere, always elsewhere. And tonight, as this story comes to rest, there is nothing left to follow. Only the realization that everything we call light is never truly ending. It is always moving forward into something new. Thank you for being here tonight, for following this journey from the heart of the sun through the silence of space into oceans, forests, eyes, and finally into your own awareness. If you are still here, you don't need to hold on to anything from this. Let the thoughts soften. Let everything slow down again. Let the mind become quiet again. For a while, the sound around you will remain. Soft brown noise and a gentle space ambiance, holding the silence where words used to be. No direction, no story, only calm. Good night, and rest well, because even now, light is still traveling. Somewhere in the sun, another photon has just begun its journey, and it will find its way forward, as it always does.